Experts say that linking Yukon and BC's power grids will be a game changer, but it will take time. And one of those experts is Jason Donev, a University of Calgary professor, who joined us earlier to unpack why BC and Yukon linking power grids would likely take more than a decade and what factors would play into that duration.
So one of the things that it's difficult for us to understand down here in southern Canada. I mean, I'm here in Calgary, which is very very southern Canada. Um, Canada goes a whole lot further north than we tend to think of. The distance between where the BC grid stops and where the Yukon grid starts is hundreds of kilometers. So if you know where Toronto is and you know where Quebec City is, imagine trying to cut a path through trees from Toronto to Quebec City or from Vancouver to Calgary, and it's nonstop forest. Um, and with the nonstop forest, you don't have a lot of construction resources and so forth. So all of this has to be brought in. You're off grid. Um, you're bringing your diesel, your workers, and so forth. So that's one of the reasons why it's both so expensive and why it would take so long just to construct. This is also going through various indigenous territories. Um, and the various communities, the indigenous communities that live within that neighborhood, and not even just cutting through, but adjacent to, are going to have to be consulted. So there's a duty to consult and a duty not only to consult but to collaborate with the local indigenous communities. Um, I This is still early days, but I imagine that both the BC government and the Yukon government are going to want to sit down and engage, not in a cursory, hey, we're doing this sort of way, but in a how can we do this going forward in a good way, starting in a good place.
We also asked Dr. Donev what specific impacts this would have on Yukon and BC communities that would make this a game changer.
The game changer is far more about the Yukon than it is about BC. In terms of the population of the territories, each of the territories, or Yukon specifically, uh, the entire grid for um, for the Yukon is roughly 80, 90 megawatts, which is a medium-sized power plant in BC. So the overall impact in BC, other than actually laying the track to get up there, which is a couple $1 billion project, other than that, the impact to BC is pretty minor. But when you're talking about a remote grid, like what you have up in Yukon. So it's a grid, but it's entirely independent from the rest of the North American grid. So BC has a grid, Alberta has its grid, and there are interties. So while those are separate grids, those are tied together in a way that allows BC to sell electricity to Alberta and Alberta to sell electricity to BC. So if we've got too much or we need a little more, that can flow back and forth. But BC and Alberta are basically the same size. Yukon being much, much smaller gets to take advantage of the extensive network of BC's grid. So at the moment, Yukon is relying extensively on hydropower, um, well over half, something to the tune of two-thirds, maybe even three-quarters, depends on how you look at the numbers kind of thing. They're certainly doing wind, they're certainly doing solar, but then when they hit the capacity for that, they're then left with liquefied natural gas, they're left with diesel. Getting them on BC's grid can allow them to get off of the diesel, which has to be brought in, right? Like they don't have a lot of local diesel production. So the diesel's being brought in from a far ways away. This means that the limitations on Yukon's power grid go away or at least dramatically reduce. This provides a lot of opportunities for an industrial base to build up in Yukon. This allows for a lot more population growth because Yukon is actually anticipating a significant population growth over the course of the next 15 years. This intertie would allow that population growth to have access to the electricity that they want, but would also allow a lot of industry that requires a significant electrical infrastructure to build up at the same time.